We're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to Strategy and Performance, 17th of March 22. Welcome to those who are watching on the stream, and welcome to all our board members and contributors this evening. I believe that we have a gentleman called Mark Lee taking our minutes this evening as well. So I think it's the first time, Mark, you've done this. So welcome and good luck with it. We do tend to chatter a fair bit, so good luck with it. So first agenda item is nominated substitutes. Do we have any, or apologies, please?
We have apologies from Councillor Sutherland, and Councillor Tremaine is substituting, Chair.
Thanks very much, Lauren. Members' interests, just to remind members of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests that might have in relation to the items included on the agenda. Either do it now or not forever hold thy peace, but to do it at the time if it becomes appropriate, please. Anything at the moment that people wish to raise any interests? Can't see any. Good, we'll wait, see if any come up on particular items. Thank you. Admission to the public. It's not recommended that the public be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of the items on the business of this particular agenda. So you're welcome to listen to all that is said. Let's start with the first substantive item now, the minutes of the agenda. Members of the board will have received those. Do you wish to agree or correct them? Any corrections or comments in the first instance, please? Can't see anybody indicating. Would somebody like to propose those as a correct record?
Councillor Metcalfe indicating.
Thank you. Can I second them? No, Victoria, thank you for seconding. All those in favour of the accepting the minutes? Thank you very much. So let's move smartly on to the first main item on the agenda, staff wellbeing and resilience, an organisational development update. We had a report back in June 21 and we requested the findings from the staff wellbeing resilience survey which was carried out by Public Health and Human Resources, and it will also include an update on the organisational development, specifically the training aspects for staff and induction programmes post the pandemic. I believe that we've got looking at it in two main areas. My notes say that employee resilience will be handled by Debs Harkins, Richard Porter and Jackie Addison. Don't know who wants to kick off on this one. As usual, we have had all the reports, extensive though they are. We've had a chance to read them, so it's I think it's headlines and then questions. So Jackie, are you kicking off on this one, or?
Yeah, I was just going to introduce, if I may, please. So we've got, as you quite rightly said, Chair, good evening, members and officers. We've got staff wellbeing and resilience and organisational development update, and I'll cover the OD update. We've got Debs Harkins and Richard Porter from Public Health on, who will cover the first part, obviously, with me chipping in terms of the HR and OD support. And then I've got Lee Broadbent, who's presenting the Health and Safety Annual Report later on. So if I hand over, I think initially to Debs. Debs, do you want to take it first, or do you want Richard to?
Take it away, Debs.
I was just going. Richard has done the vast majority of the work on the survey and on the report. So I'm going to say nothing more than just over to Richard. But I'm here, if there's any questions or comments later to listen.
And it's a bit like the Six Nations rugby, quick passing from one to the other. So for those who are not rugby fiends, then that perhaps goes beyond things. Richard, though, fire away, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, good afternoon to everyone in the room. So in terms of, I'll just do a very short summary of the survey that was conducted last year. and then follow on with the in terms of the employee resilience and wellbeing plan, and then there'll be obviously questions to open up and follow on. So I believe this was obviously placed into the agenda pack, and the survey findings are found off on page 17 to 40 for everyone's reference. But I just want to just generally state that that this was the second resilience survey that was done. So we have 2 data points. The first survey was done back in 2020, and then just about a year later, the survey that I'm reporting on now was done. So we had 2 data points and information from colleagues, and as you can see from the action plan, we do have plans now to go with an annual survey and go with a 3rd survey very shortly. But in general, it was a good response from colleagues. We had 759 responses over a 2-week period, and overall, council colleagues' resilience had stood fast, remained resilient through the pandemic, taken from the measures that was done back in 2020 to the measures that we can see recorded in this survey in 21. But the only snapshot is that all the measures had not gone back to pre-pandemic UK population norms, but we'd seen improvements, and in future we may see further improvements to come. So in terms of employees reporting very good and good physical health, had also not quite achieved the same measures back in 2020 in this 2021 survey, and that may be understandable when vast amounts of colleagues were working from home, and in particular maybe sat at home on desks for longer periods of time, and amongst other things. But I say that good number of response, 759, that 78% was from full-time workers and 21% were from part-time workers. And we had a good really representative from managers or those who supervise staff, at 29%. It told us a lot about the current work situation, that 6 out of 10 were working from home. Some colleagues were doing some hybrid working, that was working from home and going out to other centres or other office space. 3 in 10, and 1 in 10 was solely working at a council specific office or building, so a really small amount in that current pandemic period. But the mass majority, 8 out of 10, sort of mentioned that COVID-19 had certainly changed how they worked somewhat or completely, and 9 out of 10 felt that their work had changed and was different from that before COVID-19. Colleagues felt that they were flourishing, 19%. Some colleagues, around 59%, felt that they were coping with the work, but unfortunately 19% felt they were finding it difficult to manage the work, and a small percent, 3%, were not coping. So we do have to think positively. 6 out of 10 colleagues overall were finding work that it was manageable, it was capable back then, but 4 out of 10 were finding it difficult, and may not find it possible to work in the current position. We took some measures, we took some validated measures in the survey on mental health, on physical health. The thing about those who reported very good or good mental health was quite high, 56%, and that was a good positive increase of 9% from the previous year when we took the measure about their mental health. But we just did see that some had an increase of those reporting very bad or bad mental health, 3%, a small increase, but something to know. Employee happiness was another measure that we took, and again there was a mean score that was taken from the questions, but we had seen positively a small increase from the previous year. Employee anxiety had reduced as well from those who responded in the survey. compared to the previous year. Employee satisfaction had also increased from the previous year. And those who reported feeling lonely had remained the same. So we had the same amount of people feeling generally lonely in terms of colleagues from the survey and the one the previous year. So we've got some good measures that are validated. We've got a couple of points and everything was moving generally in the right direction, which is great to see. In terms of physical health, we asked our employees thought about their physical health at that period of time, and 63% of colleagues thought they had very good or good physical health, but that actually was a reduction of 6% from the previous year. And that might go to say, like my earlier statement, that colleagues had spent quite a period of time generally working from home and maybe a bit more sedentary in that period of time. What we can see from the survey was that the things that came really strong, we had lots of open text, we had tens of thousands of words to analyse, and job control, and communication was really important, social support in using technology. We need to do some further work on the development of an induction or council induction period, especially because people being introduced into the council through COVID, and so different things and different ways were happening. We needed to improve on recognition and rewards for council colleagues, and work and explore their values and behaviour. And that led on then into the employee resilience and wellbeing plan. There was 9 goals identified. And you can see that in your agenda pack, page 41 to 47. And that just for everyone's note, that there was 9 goals identified. 1, to undertake an annual employee resilience survey. 2, to be accredited to the West Yorkshire Fair Work Charter. 3, to promote employee autonomy control within working arrangements. 4, to review and improve communication within the organisation. 5, to reduce employee isolation and loneliness. 6, to support the use of technology. And 7, to in terms of development of the induction, to reflect new working arrangements. 8, to improve staff recognition. And 9, to define organisational culture. And we have the resilience and wellbeing plan. And we've done some work today and further work. So it's a fluid action plan and document. So I'm going to open up and finish there for comments and questions.
Thanks very much, Richard. There's a huge amount of work and data in there. So we have to thank you for that, and all those who contributed towards it. One very basic question. I think you've got something like nearly 760 responses. What was that as a proportion of the total surveys that were sent out? Did you get a high return rate?
Hi, Chair. So in terms of the responses, there was a number of, I think that just comes to, and Jackie may be able to provide the direct figure, but I think that's just approaching a quarter of council employees. Right. We did place the survey out through our e-call electronic newsletter, and that was pushed out a number of times through relevant points throughout that period. We did promote through wider teams and opportunities where managers can bring that up with their teams as well. So we did provide a number of promotional opportunity points. It was a good response rate, but we also need to reflect that it's not wholly representative of the council workforce.
It's the way these sorts of surveys, isn't it? I mean, you're not going to get a huge number, but it's a reasonable proportion, I think, isn't it? and clearly you've made some efforts to ensure that it's a decent number. I just thought it would be a useful starting point as a base for us. But I've got some hands up now. So Councillor Porritt, Victoria, you've got your hand up. Then I know Megan has as well.
Megan was ahead of me. She had her hand up quite early, so I shall step to one side and let Megan go.
You're too fair. Too fair. Megan,
thank you, Victoria. Mine's a very quick one, really. I mean, I can't imagine anything more dreary than health and safety. And where's he gone? His picture's gone down there. And he obviously enjoys what he's doing immensely. And because of that, you know, it's coming up with some interesting bits. But I'm glad I don't have to do that job. I don't think people would be safe if I did. A lot of the things you mentioned after I put my hand up, one of the things is, have we done a particular survey of people who live by themselves? Because we know there was a problem with people who live by themselves and work by themselves. Even if they haven't mentioned lonely, it must be dreadfully lonely to do that and to go on forever. At least we could sneak into the town hall occasionally, but don't run, that's good enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, do you want to come back on that one?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Swift. We didn't take a specific question where someone could respond that there was living at home alone or they were living with family members. We can only get a grasp through the qualitative responses that people placed within the survey at the number of points, and try and quantify in terms of the response rate out of that over 700 colleagues. There were a vast, wide number of scenarios of colleagues who were living and working from home alone, colleagues who had a partner or living with other family members. We had family members who were providing care and caregiving for other family members, and we had a number of people responding who were providing information that they're also a parent working from home, and giving us a synopsis of how life is for them. So the rich information gives us a real picture of how it was back then during the pandemic and what kept them resilient, what would help them remain resilient going forwards. And that's where we hope the action plan really takes hold of that information and has a programme of work going forwards.
Thank you for that. Debs, I think, before I come on to you, Victoria, I think Debs wanted to answer that question as well. So fire away, Debs, please.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. No, it was Richard's absolutely right. We didn't ask a quantitative question about this, but the point I was going to make is one of the things that we've been thinking as the follow-up from the surveys is about doing more snap surveys, focusing on particular issues. So we can't tell you how many of the people that responded lived on their own, but we definitely, as you can see, there's a theme that's come out that's in the action plan about loneliness, and particularly for those that are working at home more, potentially. Councillor Swift's absolutely right, you know, that one of the things that we read in the comments was that might be more of an issue for people that live alone. So it's one of that's the sort of thing we can do to understand more about that, is some of these smaller snap surveys that take a specific focus on a particular issue. And I think it'd be really useful for us to do some on, as we move into the new ways of work in the next phase of the way that we work, potentially doing a bit of work on understanding a little bit more about loneliness and isolation.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Debs. Councillor Tremaine, Diana, I think you're standing in for Dan Sutherland today, but I think you've got your hand up, have you?
I have, but Victoria still needs to
You missed me out, Ashley.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've just noticed.
I was too polite letting Megan go ahead, wasn't I?
We'll come back to you, Diana.
Muscle in. No, it's fine.
It's been one of those days, I'm afraid, today, so you'll have to forgive me.
Honestly, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm quite happy to speak up. Yeah, thank you for this enormous piece of work. There's a lot in there, obviously, to pick out. So a couple of things. One is the thing that stood out for me actually was the enormous disparity in levels of coping between the different staff, and actually was I found quite disturbing the idea that there's that number of people struggling to manage, potentially on their own. And I understand that with this survey, it was anonymised to the extent that we don't know what directorates these people are in. We don't know what level they're working at. But presumably you could cross-reference from the responses whether people have said they're working from home and they're struggling to cope, whether we've got more people in particular working situations that are perhaps experiencing different levels of how they're managing. But looking at sort of the next time, the next report, is there going to be a way of retaining the anonymity of the data but getting more granular about what directorates these people in and what level are they working at, to understand maybe if we've got some particular problems in some particular areas, and whether, how that could be addressed. I thought it was particularly interesting seeing how the managers seemed to be feeling that things were going better than perhaps the staff were. And again, I think that's concerning. And with communication coming up, that feels like that's connected as well. There's so much to unpick. And clearly, having asked these questions, it's absolutely vital that we deliver on people's concerns to maintain that employee trust so that they will respond again next time, because this is really, really important data, and we want more of it. But the only way we do that is by listening and making sure that people go, oh, well, it's worth filling in that survey because actually my voice will be heard. So yeah, lots to I could ramble probably indefinitely, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I think this is always the way with these sorts of surveys, particularly your last point there, Victoria, is that you raise people's expectations because you're asking them questions. And then if you don't do something afterwards, then it really does stop people responding next time, and also tends to make people a little disgruntled because we've raised their expectations. So I think it's a very important area there. Diana, do you please come in now? And then I've got Roger I can see next, certainly.
Thanks. Yeah, I suppose just a similar sort of aspect in some ways. I was thinking partly about the full-time, part-time breakdown and how it would be really helpful, I think, to have a bit of analysis of that too, because just looking partly from my own kind of work and research background, looking at some of those areas, things like cohesion from my perspective, from things that I've worked in, some of those things have perhaps improved for people who are part-time because they've been able to access things differently, and the hybrid working has meant that people who were often excluded from meetings have had an opportunity to attend things. So it's not just about well-being, but it is partly the flexibility of the hybrid approach. And also on the opposite account, things like workload can hit part-time employees obviously harder because they may feel undue pressure potentially of trying to kind of cram more in. So there were just a couple of points there that I think exploring some of those aspects would perhaps be really helpful. And the other point I just wanted to make quickly was actually the bit about the recommendations around qualitative analysis. I think having open responses is really valuable for something like this. I think it's really, really important, and putting in some time to analyse that, I think, is a really important thing to do. So I would definitely support that.
Yeah, I agree, Diana, that qualitative stuff, as they tend to refer to it as, don't they, that is a very important aspect of it. But I gather you gathered many words in that context from what you were saying early on, Richard, and therefore there was a huge amount of data to analyse, and analysing that sort of information does take a lot of time, but it has lots and lots of benefits in terms of generating the sort of quality of data that we wanted. Roger, you wanted to come in, I think. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman Ashley, which way around we like it. Yes, I've read this. I'm glad I get paper copies because I can put them down, but I've read this twice, actually. I found this one of the most interesting papers I've ever actually read, because we have had unprecedented time. This has been, we've got to admit that. And I'm very, very interested in the working from home, because I'm in my kitchen. I don't have a spare bedroom, and I don't have some shelves of books behind me, or a background where I'm going to have to get Wix to come in and do it up, you know. But a house embarrassment, I think, is
Roger.
but the point is, and I live alone, which of course Megan raised earlier, which makes it easier actually. People with dogs and small children trying to work from home, it must be very, very difficult, but it's doing the best we could at the time. I just wanted to raise a few points. On page 28, it goes on about customer relations, and I think that is important, because staff and obviously managers are answering how they feel all the working from home and all the change in working practices has affected the public out there. Because of course, when the end of the day, that's why we're all here, aren't we? Whether we're officers, whether we're managers, whether we're workforce, or whether we're members. And I think on that one, it's quite saying it's been a contributing factor in key departments, in particular council employees, where roles have been made more difficult, either through lengthy processes, inability physically. I think that should be to see customers, or customers' expectations have not changed. Yes, that is the crux. And then the next one, which is isolation and lack of human contact, which comes back to what Megan raised. That does make a difference. Again, I live alone, and I must confess, I have my mobility. I have a motor car. I can get out there. When my mother was knocking on in years, she was virtually housebound, and it must have been mentally very difficult for her. And it raises the points, but I'm so glad that these have been raised and presented in this way. It's not being given its all sweetness and light. We're getting the whole 9 yards, as it is. And I can see Debs is nodding her head. And finally, on page 30, again, it's under occupational conditions. Again, one comment: I find it difficult to work at home due to family situation, home environment. I'm sure that has all been taken into consideration. I once heard quite an amusing comment that was posted on, I think it was a radio station. It says, "I'd love to work from home, but I can't get my HGV wagon into the lounge," you know. Obviously, it was tongue-in-cheek and it was a joke. And honestly, those drivers have looked after us. My only other question, and then I will be quiet, is how we reach. Well, I know we do surveys with the public. I know we have a list of people who take emails all the time. But again, going back to the likes of my mother thought a computer was a typewriter with a TV screen, which I suppose, you know, is quite a reasonable description. She wouldn't know where to start. She never actually had a credit card either. She had a bank check guarantee, but she never had a credit card. So IT for her was a no-no. You know, sometimes getting the right station on the TV was difficult. Do we still do regular surveys with public, both online, written, and everything else? Debs is nodding. That's a yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. And I know Debs is wanting to come in on this one anyway. So please, away you go, Debs. And then I've got Susan as well. But Debs has been up for a while. Debs.
It was yeah, thank you, Chair. No, it was just to say absolutely, listening to doing surveys, but also out there chatting and on groups chatting, working through our community engagement, our neighbourhoods team has been really important throughout the whole of the pandemic. We've really every step we've been taking soundings from the public, from communities, because that's really, really important. And we know that there's been sort of risks and benefits, if you like, of the ways of working, the changed ways of working that we've had to balance. It was just actually the reason I put my hand up was just a little bit earlier, just to say that in terms of some of the ways that we've made sense of this data and this information, the employee reference group have helped us with that. They really helped us get the good response rate that we've got. They helped us make sense of all the reams and reams of information. But the comments that have been made about it'd be really helpful to know, you know, how were the things that people that lived alone were different from people that didn't live alone? How were the comments different for the people that were coping and the people that were not coping? It was really, really tough with the software that we've got to do that. But you can see see that one of the actions in the action plan is in future that we get some proper qualitative software that'll help us do that. So compare the rich data, the qualitative data that we've got, but compare some of those groups, you know, so people who were coping, people who weren't coping, etc. So the reason I put my hand up, Councillor Evans, was just to respond to that point from a couple of the members.
Thank you, Debs. Yeah, and Susan.
Yeah, I wasn't actually going to say anything about this, but I thought I would. I'll tell you why. This is my last scrutiny meeting for Calderdale Council, and I'm standing down. And one of the reasons I'm standing down, and I'll be absolutely honest with you, is because I've had the most appalling mental health in the last 2 years. It's been really awful. Just having Zoom meetings all the time. And I do live on my own. And I would love to see a drilling down of these figures and ask people who live on their own how they feel about working from home. Because I can only speak for myself really, but I know that I've felt incredibly frustrated in the last 12 months. I've tried and tried and tried to get meetings to go hybrid, because obviously hybrid is the way forward. I've attended meetings of the fire authority since last June in person, because that's what we had to do to vote. And it's still a puzzle to me why Calderdale could not facilitate scrutiny meetings in a hybrid fashion. So I'm coming to the end of my time on Calderdale Council. I'm incredibly disappointed that my attempts, and not on my own, to return to some form of normality and have hybrid meetings didn't really get very far. And I do hope that changes in the future. But when you actually look at this report, and I just wanted to point out on 9, only 20% found it was an entirely positive. So that means 80% did not, and 70% see positives and negatives. I accept that people living on their own are perhaps in the minority, and maybe people who are badly impacted mentally are in the minority, but please don't forget them, because I do hope going forward that employees will be able to work in the way in which they choose, and they won't be stuck at home, because I know frankly that from my point of view it's an enormous relief not to be having to attend these Zoom meetings anymore, because I found it very, very difficult.
Yeah, I take your points very much, Susan. I'm very, very sympathetic to that. I think we should have moved a bit quicker in the direction of face-to-face and or hybrid, as you're suggesting. And I do think that's probably the way forward in the short to medium term, at least. So thank you for that. I've note that Councillor Dacre Sylvia wants to come in towards the end. I've got a couple of questions myself, Sylvia, if I may come to you in a bit. In the presentation, there were a list of, I think it was 8 or 9 items, proposed actions, things like undertaking annual surveys, support the use of technology, develop induction process, and so on. I suppose my question in relation to that is that's great, but what are we doing to address the issues outlined in that table? What are the steps involved? And I think certainly one of my comments at the end of this session will be to I think we need to come back to it in, I don't know, 6 months' time or whatever, and see how we've progressed along those. But I would be interested to hear what your thoughts are, officers, in terms of how we're going to address those issues which are in that list. I think there is quite a series of documents within the overall bit, but I think just some headlines from that will be useful, please. Debs, did you want to do that, or Richard, or whoever?
I'm happy to, Chair, if that's okay. I'll have a go. Please. And Jackie and Richard might want to come in as well. I mean, I think the first thing I would say before I get into the sort of action plan is that, you know, this the findings of this survey have really influenced and are really influencing the work that we've been doing over the last couple of months about the sort of future, I guess, living with COVID and what that means for us as a council, and the extent to which people will return to the office, those that haven't been working in the office the whole time. So, you know, one of the things that's come out really strongly, I think, is the the relationship and the importance of managers and people's line managers in terms of those relationships. So what we've asked all staff to do is have a conversation with their manager, and they should have done it by the end of March. We said about their preferences, about their health and well-being, and about their preferences in relation to working in the office, hybrid working, connecting with others, etc. Now, obviously, the needs of the service we're a public service, aren't we? So the needs of the service must always take absolute precedent in those conversations, and managers obviously understand the needs of the service. But by having those conversations, by addressing those issues, by addressing people's sort of needs and preferences, because they are very different, and people's circumstances mean they feel very different, then what's important then is that managers and staff members can have a conversation about the extent to which those preferences can be accommodated. So those conversations are happening now, and I've been having some of those conversations. And for example, if I just give an example, a couple of staff members really needed to return to the office in terms of their health and well-being, and I won't be the only manager that this has happened, where those conversations have led to that. So we are already, as far as we can, accommodating people whose personal circumstances mean that they need to come into the office or work more from home, etc. Obviously within the constraints of the needs of the service. So I think that's a fundamental thing that's influencing how we're taking this forward. But what's also what's set out in the appendix that you've got in that table are the actions that we're taking to address those 9 points that have been identified. So, for example, the Fair Work Charter, we are at our employee reference group next week. We're taking the draft Fair Work Charter, which is just opened in the last few days for consultation, to our employee reference group to have a conversation, to feed back on the draft charter, for example. But when that charter's published, we'll be working through what do we need to do? What does that charter mean for us as an organisation? And our employee reference group and our employee networks will be key to exploring what that will mean. We're doing there's already an enormous amount of work that's been done on induction, and Jackie and the team are the experts on that, but we've done a lot of work over the last few months on developing an induction system that can accommodate people that are working remotely as well as people that are working in the office. We've also had some really useful conversations with our employee reference group and our staff networks about communication. So we can really understand people's communication preferences. And actually our communications team are currently, in light of all of that, reviewing the different communication processes. And again, the survey and the conversation at the employee reference group made it really clear that it isn't a one-size-fits-all, and actually there isn't a single answer to communication, and that communication needs to happen in a range of different ways to meet everybody's needs. We've already as well set up in relation to the loneliness and isolation issue. We've already set up some networks for staff groups that are particularly impacted by the pandemic. So, for example, we have a number of staff that were clinically extremely vulnerable. So on that list of people that were at really high risk of serious illness if they contracted COVID, and that group have got really pretty unique issues and challenges. And so again, there's a network now of people that can support each other. There was a group of people that were that got children at home, that are single parents, perhaps with children at home, that are put in touch with each other to talk about how they can support each other, particularly when in the periods of time when schools were closed. So that's just a taster. In that document with the table, we've tried to set out the actions that we'd we'd like to take, and then the very final column, we've highlighted some of the progress that's already been made, but I think it'd be really useful to come back again, you know, to this group to sort of give updates on that. Yeah,
very much so. Thank you for that, Debs. Yeah, and that certainly would be one of my recommendations from here. We'd like to see you all again. We'd like to see you all again anyway, but we'd like to see you all again and talk about it in 6 months' time. So, Richard, I don't feel you have to, but is there anything you wanted to add to that at this stage?
Thank you, Chair. I was slightly taken off guard with the question with my son popping in, and
I hadn't noticed.
Bath time.
One of the benefits of working from home.
But Debs did really summarise further work to come, obviously, and therefore a return back. But also I'd like to just mention as well to for Councillor Press just mentioned around about own mental health and struggles, and I think that's a really great thing and brave thing to do in the group. And I myself has been dealing with poor mental health for a number of years, and it has been a very tough period, and continues to be so. But just be kind, resilient, and support each other out as well as members. So that's what I just finish off with.
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's one of the things that comes out of the report, isn't it? That the flexible working and the support from managers and colleagues and so on is all critical stuff. And your comment there just summarises that, Richard. Thank you for that. The only other area that I'd got a note on, Megan, I'll come to you in a second. I'll just finish this if I may. We talked about physical health as well as mental health. What actions are we taking in terms of encouraging, helping and promoting physical health as well as the mental side? Whoever wishes to come back on that one.
Hi, Chair. I think great point we did pick up, didn't we, about the potential of some colleagues who have seen their physical health reduce over that period of time. So there's been a colleague in public health who's been doing some great work in bringing other colleagues out, for example, an afternoon walk around the park, the Heath area, and getting out, and they've certainly been promoting that. Colleagues have also been taking opportunity to continue and re-pick up some of the work as well pre-COVID by continuing some of the groups that was pre-existing, getting out for walks, running. There's been lots of stuff that's been happening in eCall to promote being physically active, either that being what can you do from your desk space, what can you do outside of work. And we know that being physically active outside in the environment was one of the best ways that people remained resilient through that period, and I can see that not particularly changing much. So being outside environment is really important, and doing the broader well-being measures as well, taking note of the environment, and listening to bird song and such other things. So there's been a number of things going on around physical activity.
That's good. Yeah. That's good to hear, thank you. And I suppose that's one of the benefits of being a councillor as well, is that you have ward work and you have to go out around your ward. And I did one up in Worley the other weekend, and we walked right up on the top above Worley, and it's a bit haven't been to for ages, and I thought this is wonderful, but I was doing some ward work as well, so that was good, and it really makes you open up a little bit, so it's good to see. Megan, I think you've had your hand up for a while. Can I take your comment, please?
Yeah, I'm still going backwards. Sorry, Ashley. I don't really understand if somebody's living by themselves and working by themselves, if they're doing I'm tough, I can do this, when they know full well they're not. It makes it very difficult for a manager to recognise what's going on, because if you're in the same office as somebody, you'll look and you'll think, he's not very good this morning. You can't do that over the screen. So I just wanted to, say, can we be clear? And it would be quite interesting, Deb, to get members to fill your survey form in, because we know from just the two of us here that there's 2 have been hit quite badly. So that's all I had to say, Ashley.
No, thank you, Megan. And that really links up with one of the other bits of data that I was very, not shocked by, but taken aback by a little bit, where people were asked to how they were coping. And I think it was a significant number, upwards of 4 in 10, saying they're struggling, and we really do need to do work in that area, don't we? I mean, we need to do work for them in terms of our responsibility as an employer. We need to also, because that could affect in terms their work patterns and how well they do the job, and therefore how well our residents are supported by people. So it's a sort of two-sided one, is that we have a responsibility for those people, and it's a significant number. And I think that's something we're going to be living with for quite some time, and we're having to work on. So look forward to hearing what's happening, and hopefully that part of the data declining rather than increasing. Okay, I can't see anybody else, but Sylvia, you like to come in and towards the end of things. Do you want to put in your 10 penneth?
Yep, thanks, Chair. So just following on from that point, one thing I was curious about when I was looking at the responses is, and it's similar to some of the questions that have been asked by other people, is how is it possible to disentangle the impact of working at home from the other pressures of COVID, which in many cases have led to substantial additional burdens on people, having to take on extra jobs, having to do jobs they didn't do before, all those sorts of things. So I'd just be concerned that we might start moving back to a form of hybrid working where it's sometime in the office, sometime at home, but those underlying work pressures are still there. And I don't know how much it's possible to tell that from the survey at the moment. The other point, and again, it follows on from some of the things that members have been saying, is, do we know the proportion of those who responded who were people who never did work from home because they had the jobs where they had to carry on working in the community, which obviously gave them different stresses, but didn't revolve around the isolation and working at home? And we may not know that. And I thought that the point about autonomy, I think that is just so important. And I was really pleased when I got to the end and saw the action plan, because as you say in there, one of the most important one of the most serious drivers of workplace stress is the feeling of lack of control. People can work hard if they feel they can control what they do. And when they can't, that's when they really start getting stressed. And so that will obviously come from all sorts of things, but again, not just the working from home, but in all sorts of other ways about how you can give some people some control over what they do. So I think that's really good that we're looking at that. And in relation to that, what my impression that I got from this was that there will be a few people who will want to return, who currently are at home or on hybrid, who will want to return to the office more, but the majority of people seem to be wanting very much a mix. And it seems to be that it's maybe 1 day a week and perhaps team meetings where you're going to get the opportunity to see people. And it simply is never going to return for everyone to being in the office, everyone being in the office every day. But again, I think that's, as you say, it's to do with the autonomy to a degree within business needs. And I do think it's brilliant that you have open text in your survey, because in my former employment, we had an employee survey, and it infuriated people because the questions were slanted you were given multiple choice answers, which were designed to ensure that you gave an answer that was going to be helpful to management, and there was very little opportunity to give any free text. And that just is a positive harm to employee well-being when you do surveys like that. So I think it's much, it's a good survey in that sense, but I do appreciate the need for help to sort of help to try and analyse all of that data. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Yes, and one of my further previous lives, I was in market research for quite a long time, and there was always discussion about the answer to questions where you could write a response as opposed to tick boxes and so on. But we certainly found that if you analysed it well, you got at least as useful information out of the written statements as you did out of the tick boxes. And you certainly needed both together to get a full picture. So yes, I think some good work being done here. I think the important thing is to, I'm teaching you to suck eggs here, but the important thing is to follow it up, make sure that actions are taken on all of these things as you've done in your list, and we look forward to seeing you in 6 months' time, say, to see how it goes from there. So thank you very much, all of you that were involved in that one. We need to move on then, I think, to item 6, which is the health and safety one. I think, have we covered all the aspects there?
Chair, sorry, could I come in there?
Yes, of course, please.
Yeah, I think we've just missed the second part of the previous item.
Mere detail. I'm getting carried away here by all the excitement.
That's all right, no problem. We had a good discussion there, so thank you for that, Chair. If you're okay with me moving on. So I came, as you know, I came a few months ago. I think it was June actually, last year, and talked about all the different things that we were doing from a HR and OD perspective with regard to staff that were working remotely, etc. And you invited me to come back today to just update you further on what we're doing with regard to training and induction. I think the report is self-explanatory. I know time is ticking on, so I won't go through the report as I intended, but just to pick out a few salient points, Chair, with your permission, if that's okay.
Please do. That's the best way. Thank you.
Okay. So in terms of what we've done, induction, Deb slightly covered it there when she talked a little bit around induction and what I've done there. Revamping induction, we have a corporate induction which has grown and which is really well attended, which is great, and we do ask staff to attend, and it's covered. The introduction is done by Robin as Chief Executive. It does an sort of an opening briefing to staff, really setting the scene, the visions, the values, etc. And I have to say, I think it's one of the things that Robin really enjoys about doing the induction. And then my staff do the next part of it in terms of the modular type approach to it, but it's grown to such an extent, it's been so successful that we now want to move it into a proper modular approach. I'm really sorry, that's my dog. Sky, sit down. Sorry. The joys of having pets at home.
That was a very valid comment though.
Yes, yeah, it was very good, very important. So what we've done is we've moved induction, or we're moving it now from April into a modular type approach that it's not just for new staff, but for existing staff as well that might want to brush up on an area in terms of what's changed, and also things that perhaps when they first commenced, I started with the council in the early 80s, and we didn't have an induction, a proper corporate induction. So there will be people that have started early on that didn't have a corporate induction. So we're going to break it off into an induction type, modular type approach to induction, should I say. And that'll cover a number of things, not just about, how we work, etc., but also about support for staff. So to pick up on some of the things that Councillor Press and other councillors have raised, mental health, well-being initiatives, and all the different things that people might experience throughout their employment. It might be about managing money better and so on, not to teach granny how to suck eggs, but to give people support where they are struggling. So that's the approach that we're taking with induction. I've covered in the report about apprenticeships and what we're doing there. We've currently got 12 apprenticeships out at the moment. We've got a fantastic response to that, which is really encouraging. They're across the whole of the council, which again is brilliant. And we've gone in and done quite a bit of work with schools, academies, communities, underrepresented groups to encourage applications, to help them to support, get ready to apply so that they know what we expect from them as an applicant, but also to help them as well. And then with regard to other learning and development opportunities, we've got a hybrid approach to training. We've had to move quite a lot of our training onto online for obvious reasons, but we are doing a mixture of both. There's certain training we just simply cannot do through Zoom and Teams, and we don't want to do. We want that interaction. Lee will cover it in his health and safety update, no doubt, later on. So we're moving out of fully e-enabled training to a mixture of both, and obviously giving people an opportunity if they don't want to come in, if people are still fearful about coming into the workplace, etc. But we're trying to cater for everybody. So that's a bit of a quick tour across OD. I don't know if you want me to pause there and then invite questions.
Very happy to. Thanks, Jackie. That's a good intro to it. I mean, I've just got one question on the induction side. Whilst other members think of perhaps what they might want to ask on this. Have we had any, do you sort of seek feedback on the induction aspect of things, particularly for new starters, when we'll have had a number of new starters during the pandemic, I guess? You know, are we taking learning from feedback on the induction process? How does that happen?
We do. We get feedback from them. We ask them to complete once they've done the induction, we ask them to complete a feedback form, which is really why we're changing the way things are done at the moment, really following that feedback, to listen to, you said we did kind of approach, and they've enjoyed it, but they want more, and they want modular type approach as well, so that they can come back and revisit. So that's one of the reasons that we're moving into that. Another reason is, like I've said, to pick up existing staff that need a little bit more support, really, and want to revisit things that they've perhaps not done previously. And things change, don't they? You know, we're in a fluid.
They've changed a lot in the last 2 years as well.
Absolutely.
Bob, you wanted to come in, I think.
You're on mute, Councillor Metcalfe.
You're still on mute,
Sorry.
Bob.
I'm not. I'm trying to get out of mute. It's typical, like Susan. It's my last meeting as well. I'm just being frustrated with the problems I've got with IT tonight. It's typical, is that that it just decides to pick that now to play up, and I've also been locked out of ModGov, so I can't just access the papers, which I have read, of course, but I can't access them tonight. So if I get a bit out of sync on where we are, I'm sorry. I just wanted to.
Councillor Taylor is waving paper at us here. So.
Well, I know he gets it. Yeah. That's trying to cut down on paper. That's fine, as long as you can have reliable IT to get into things properly. I've been in the ModGov. I've looked at them. Been in before this morning, so no problem. But of course, when it's live, it always happens.
Of course.
What I wanted to say when I get round to it is that I saw the interesting reports about the update on apprenticeships. So I'm up in OD. That's the area I'm speaking about.
Yes.
I had a real interest in this, and it was really interesting to see just what work was going on and how big a role the council's now leading on this, both internally and with partners, and it seems to cover all the directorates. I'm assuming all directors are playing an active part. I think they were mentioned in the paper. I just want to go just ask, one of the most difficult areas for people to get job opportunities is people with a learning disability or a physical disability. And you know, when I was cabinet member, it was a real interest to just see how much we could increase the number of people in both apprenticeships and of course at the end of the day in work, having a full-time job or a job. And I know we got the percentage up a bit, but it's amazingly low is that percentage of people that get into proper work with a disability of some sort. So I just wanted to ask, because I know with various initiatives, the council have various initiatives, but I'm out of touch now just where we are with them. So I just wanted to ask, within that parameter that we're talking about in the report, just is this being still actively worked on? Are we getting some, you know, real achievements? Have we got some apprentices who you know, have we been able to employ or have an apprenticeship with people who have some disabilities, and particularly in learning disabilities? That's more difficult than even those with physical disabilities getting into apprenticeships and work. So general question around that, please.
Thank you, Bob. Jackie, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Councillor Metcalfe. And it's quite timely, actually, because I've just done earlier today, I did a one-to-one with my recruitment manager, who's just basically briefed me on a scheme that she's working on with Fiona Thurbeck around social care and disabilities and encouragement in terms of it's the residential homes support for them, and also a scheme that's linking to employment for people that are in a situation whereby not necessarily they would have been able to link into some of our apprenticeships, and we're doing a scheme with them, setting up a scheme at the moment to look at that. We've had a number of applications from underrepresented groups across disabilities, black and minority ethnics, etc. And we're working on those as we speak in terms of encouraging that further. I think it's fair to say that in the adult service, we are struggling to recruit in some areas. So this is a perfect opportunity for us as a council to meet that need as well, by giving people, as you quite rightly say, meaningful employment with a fair wage and fair terms and conditions. So it's a piece of work that certainly Fiona has led on with the help of my HR and OD team as well. So I'm pleased to say, yes, we are working on that. We've just gone out as well. We've been talking to Pathways about encouraging applications from apprenticeships in the different areas as well. So hopefully that will encourage as well applications from people that perhaps might not necessarily have looked at the council previously.
Thank you, Jackie. Just in the sort of context of apprenticeships, I mean, obviously, I guess to a major extent, we're talking about apprenticeships within the council. But are we active in terms of encouraging or supporting private businesses in the area as well? Do we do any work in that area?
I believe Fiona Thurbeck's team does a significant amount of work working on the employability side of things, and we have talked to them about our apprenticeship levy and how we can potentially support some of the areas further once we've looked at exhausting our apprenticeship levy spend. If there's any surplus, then we're looking at, we can passport a percentage to the private sector that's in support of the council. So that might be places like social care, places like that. So absolutely. I'm not the best person to talk about what's going on in business, but certainly Fiona Thurbeck is. Definitely, she does a significant amount of work on that with her team.
So we could perhaps ask Fiona that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the board on this one, on this subject? I've got one here in terms of the reference to recruitment and retention, which is emphasised in there, and I think there was a reference to one or two areas where we've got problems in terms of recruitment and retention. And I think one of those was legal, and I can't remember the others off the top of my head now. How are we addressing this situation where we do have problems in terms of recruitment and retention? Or are we undertaking any particular approaches to that to try and solve the problem?
Absolutely, Councillor. So I did cover in the report about workforce planning and developing and how we're working with the different areas, legal, finance, across the piece. We've got planning, we've got issues with engineering, etc. And what we're doing there is quite significant, really, the pieces of work that we're working on. We've got what we call a visioning day, where we're looking at services, and we were looking at them predominantly around commercialisation, but that's now, you know, sort of, I suppose, grown into looking at workforce planning. Okay, so we know in certain services, people are coming up to retirement. What's the plan? What are we doing? How are we growing our own? I covered it in the report, but I could talk for days on this in terms of how much work has gone into it and what we're still doing. We are in, you know, we're in difficult times, local government attracting, retaining, because we're not as competitive as private sector. It's been on the news only earlier this week about the fact that we're not keeping in line, and we really do have to look at alternatives around terms and conditions. One of the things that I've said at the last meeting, you might recall, is where I've said how we treated people in the pandemic will bode us well for the future. People will choose to stay with the organisations that look after them. Certain organisations have really struggled to recruit and retain, including local government. I think Calderdale has been particularly fantastic in terms of how we've treated our staff, being extra cautious, looking after their health and safety, well-being, etc. So we're trying really hard to bring people in at the apprenticeship route, and that apprenticeships are open. It's not just about young people. We do predominantly attract younger people, but we have, in my team, I attracted 2 mature apprenticeships in health and safety, and Lee will come on to talking about health and safety shortly. But, you know, we've attracted people that want a career change, looking at our own staff that are looking at segueing into social work, that didn't come in to do social work. We've got some fantastic stories, and we're running some recruitment campaigns to highlight that to the public, to say why it's good to work for Calderdale, why, you know, how we invest in you, how we train you, etc. It's a massive piece of work. It's fluid. We will have to just keep doing this constantly. But I was on a HR director call a couple of weeks ago where other colleagues at my level were recruit, you know, we're sort of talking about recruiting, and they've got 250 vacancies per week. We're not in that situation, but we do need to continuously develop our staff and grow our own. I think that's been our definite advantage so far, Councillor.
And thank you for that. And in linking in with that, I suppose, is the skills audit side of things in terms of how we go about that, and how we take account of the issues which are raised through the skills audit in terms of the gaps that we have, and those are across the board in sort of major areas, but within jobs as well. There are skills issues, aren't there, within subsections of jobs and so on. How do we deal with that situation?
Okay, so that's where the apprenticeship levy I refer to in the paper. We've got on page 2, 149 of our existing staff are going through, developed existing members through the apprenticeship levy, doing additional qualifications or upskilling to match the change in their environment, whether that be planning, legal, finance. So we're using the apprenticeship levy the apprenticeship levy to develop our existing staff and look at skills audit to identify any weaknesses within that. So that's where these visioning days and sort of workforce planning days are coming into their own, really, to inform us better. And we're doing surveys around that with staff about, you know, the skills audit side.
Because I was tending to assume that because it was the reference to the apprenticeship levy, that it was only with apprentices as opposed to ongoing working people. But you're using that funding to enable that work. Yeah.
Yes, we can use that funding as long as we use it within the criteria set by the government with regard to the levy. We're using it for existing staff, so it's brilliant, really, to encourage the development and training and knowledge, experience, etc. of our existing cohort of staff, and putting something back into the system.
Good, thank you for that. Yes, that clarifies it for me. Anybody else? Any questions else? Jacob, did you raise your hand there, or was it just stroking your hair into position there?
No, I didn't raise my hand. No, it's fine. I was just
okay. Yes, I thought it was a sort of, you know, whatever. So I think we've gone through all the questions on that particular one. So may I now, Jackie, move on to the one I tried to charge us onto, the health and safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'd like to introduce that, if I may, please. I'm totally embarrassed, Lee Broadbent, that's going to present this evening. So yeah. Lee is a fine example of how we've grown our own as an organisation. Lee commenced with us in 2012 as an apprentice, straight out of school, not sure whether he wanted to go to university, definitely capable of going to university, and decided to come to the council and do an apprenticeship. His mum also works with us, so it's a brilliant relationship we've got with the family, and swiftly moved on to doing technical safety support, health and safety advisor. And I think Lee will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was one of the youngest people to pass his qualification in health and safety, which is the NEBOSH qualification, but he'll talk a little bit more about that, no doubt, in due course. So without further ado, so Martin Allingham is flexibly retiring from 1st of April. Lee's just been appointed as a senior health and safety advisor, and he will then basically pick up the gauntlet from Martin when Martin's on his 2.5 days working, non-working days, should I say, and step in to keep things going. So if I can, so Lee's done this report the first time, he's followed it all the way through, and I think Lee's going to now present, if that's okay.
Okay, fire away, Lee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, councillors. Unbelievably, this is actually the 19th annual safety report that's been presented to members. And as Jackie said, this is the first that I've produced and presented. So hopefully you've had a chance to read all the information that was provided. I know that some of the appendices documents were quite comprehensive, but hopefully you've had the opportunity to digest that. But I think I'd say once again, this report continues to act really as an annual update for members on the position of health and safety at a local level and a regional level, but also nationally as well, and how that impacts on our operations and what we do as a council. So I know a lot's been said around COVID-19 already, but clearly COVID-19 presented operational challenges for everyone during the last 12 months, and the health and safety team were no exception. Our primary focus in that last 12 to 18 months was actually to ensure compliance with the government's COVID guidelines for employers from a health and safety perspective, along with guidelines published by the Health and Safety Executive. And we've continued to work collaboratively during this time with public health and occupational health to keep staff as safe as we possibly could. This work has included supporting the restart of council services to ensure that they could be delivered in a safe way without risk to health, so far as was reasonably practicable under the law. And unfortunately, we had to report several COVID cases to the enforcing authority where we had collected evidence to suggest that a workplace transmission had probably occurred. But considering the scale of the pandemic, we actually only reported 17 cases to the HSE in the corporate estate, which is testament, I think, really to the council's robust arrangements and the competent advice provided by public health and other officers during that challenging time. This sentiment was also reinforced by the enforcing authority when they conducted several spot checks on a number of Calderdale schools, and they actually commended the council's arrangements, which was really positive. What I'd say, aside from that COVID-related work, the health and safety team has been able to continue to deliver its core statutory functions. The team did a lot of proactive site inspections and monitoring work in both the corporate and educational estates. And we continue to work tirelessly to maintain the council's robust health and safety management systems to ensure that statutory compliance. I think it should also be noted that the school's health and safety team have started to pick up work from outside the borough in the last 12 months, which demonstrates their professional reputation that they have in that sector. And it demonstrates that as a team, we continue to think commercially and generate revenue for the council. All this work, though, shouldn't be underestimated. And I think we do continue to have a very low accident rate, which is shown in those supporting statistics in the Appendix 1. We've seen a significant reduction in accidents within the last period. And although COVID was the main reason for that reduction, I think it's important not to diminish some of those positive prevention initiatives that we've delivered in that period. And we know nationally that the two biggest contributors to accidents are slips, trips and falls and manual handling. And we've continued to do a lot of slip prevention work in places like pools and leisure centres, which are frequently used. We've done a lot of practical manual handling, training and awareness for some of our frontline services. I think one of the most significant points in the report is the accident which happened in the new green space and street scene service. It's probably one of the most significant incidents that we've had in recent years, but thankfully incidents of that nature are quite rare, which is good to know. Green space and street scene is one of our highest risk services, and for that reason, the investigation and the supporting improvements that we've made across the service has consumed a significant amount of our time in this period. And that accident, just so you're aware, has now been fully investigated and a comprehensive programme of improvements has been made in that service. I think finally, I'd just say, and again, I've mentioned this in the report, the fatal accident rate across the UK increased by 28% within the last reporting period. And the enforcing authority attributed that really to employers focusing on managing the risks of the pandemic and COVID-19 and failing to effectively manage other health and safety risks, which, as we know, cause a lot of fatalities in the UK. The HSE's enforcement strategy has mainly focused on COVID spot checks, but they have still prosecuted many employers, many councils once again, and the fines are in the millions of pounds. That is uninsured money. So we can't really let our guard slip on this one. And just want to finish by saying the report has to be taken very much like an MOT, in that it only provides a snapshot in time in terms of our health and safety performance. We're very confident at the moment that health and safety is effectively managed in both the corporate and educational estate, but we cannot afford to let standards slip because the legal, financial and reputational consequences are significant. So I'll finish there, and I just hope that that report acts as a reminder really to all of us that the importance of health and safety cannot be underestimated at this time. It has to continue being an organisational priority. So at that point, I'm happy to take any questions you may have in relation to the report.
Thank you very much, Lee. Very impressive report, I have to say. I think it's really well prepared. And in fact, when our scrutiny support assistant and I were talking about this, we regarded it as something of an exemplar report, really. I think you've done a great job there. And to say it's also come from starting off as an apprenticeship with it's a nice follow-on. That's not. I'm not being condescending there at all. I'm saying it in the context of what we were discussing earlier. To see somebody joining as an apprentice and developing into a very effective officer, which I think certainly from what we've read here and what you've just said would have to be the case. So thank you for that. Questions from people? Anybody? Bob, you've got your hand up, I've noticed. First of all, fire away, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was good to hear you say that you're getting, you've been able to get business outside of Calderdale, the schools team, for various schools, etc., outside of the borough. I thought I'd read in the report, though, that the number of schools within Calderdale that use our services, school service, has been still falling. Appreciate there may be more academies cropping up, and that probably is one of the reasons. Am I correct? Have I read it correctly that we're trying to, obviously work now, which is good outside the borough, because that's what I was going to ask, and you've told me you were doing that outside the borough. But it is a concern if schools are opting out in some partly or wholly for our services, health and safety services. I've been a school governor for many years, and school at Ash Green, and we've had that horrendous fire there recently, and I know the massive support we've had, and I'm sure that does include ourselves through our health and safety team. Has been just amazing. And I dread to think if there's various big things like that happen to places and they're not properly covered, that will be a real worry. I don't know what it is, why this is happening, but perhaps is it just financial reasons by schools, or something else I'm not picking up on?
I think it might be the wording in the report. I may have been slightly misleading. What I would say is there's only actually a handful of schools now within the borough that don't sign up to the service level agreement with the school safety team. And all our council-owned schools are signed up under the contract. It's just a handful of academies and foundation schools within the borough that have opted to go with private consultants and various other advisors. So you can be assured that I can't give you the exact percentage, but it's very high, the amount of schools that we've got in the contract now.
Good, thank you for that. And so sorry if I just got it a bit wrong reading the report.
That's good. Good to hear. Good to hear.
I think Councillor Evans might have just frozen. Oh, you're back.
Oh, right, sorry. I was doing a quick swipe to see whether there were any other hands up. I don't know whether that affected it.
Councillor Taylor's indicating, please, Chair.
Ask a question or comment.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. What I try and do is take the hand down as soon as I speak, because very often you find hands are left up for.
Yeah.
Yes, I was a governor of schools for over 25 years, different ones as well. I was a governor at Bolton Brow when we had the runaway wagon, and I remember everything going through. And I'd spent the last 12 years as a governor of a voluntary aided school, and again, with it being a Catholic school, it was the Diocese of Leeds that was Bradford, Leeds that was trying to get all schools to sign up to a contract. As I understand it, the school, I won't name them, but I think they did stay actually with buying in the authority, but it was certainly something we looked at. So I think on the whole, most people do tend to go with the council way because it's the one they've always done. Just a couple of quick questions. This business about 28% increase, it's in the UK of fatalities in the last year. I mean, that sounds quite dramatic when you say it, but are we talking an increase of 1, 2, 3, 10, 20? Can we just put it into some form of perspective? Because, I mean, if you have one death and you get 2, you've increased by 100%. It sounds extremely, you know what I mean? Deaths at work, a horrible thought. It's a horrible thought. So is injuries, of course. And I used to train health and safety and fire awareness at PT for a few years, so it was rammed into me about it. So I just wondered if, Lee, you could give me a rough idea of numbers, and do we know what the main thing is? You mentioned about concentrating on the pandemic, etc., which, yeah, I can understand that. I just wonder if you could give a little more detail on that, please.
Yeah, so in the last group of, the last batch of statistics before the pandemic was 2019 to 2020, and we actually had the lowest fatal accident rate recorded in the last 50 odd years. We went to 130-ish cases, and then the year after it's gone up to 160 something. So you're looking at about a 30 odd case increase. Now those figures don't include COVID fatals that have been attributed to work in some way. Some research and statistics came out this last week from the Health and Safety Executive, which suggested around about 400 fatals with COVID in relation to work-related transmissions. So that figure doesn't account for COVID. That is purely work-related accidents, and it continues to be the construction industry and agriculture that are the two highest industries.
Yeah.
Fortunately, in Calderdale, our construction is contracted out for major projects, and we do a lot of monitoring work so that we meet our client responsibilities under the CDM regulations. We've done a lot of that for things like the Northgate House project, for example, to make sure that contractors are working safely. So in Calderdale, we get away with that, and obviously our waste as well is contracted out, but we do monitoring work with Suez as the waste contractor. So fortunately, we don't do any construction really in-house, so that's positive.
Yeah, well, one death is one too many, obviously. Any death is. But I just wondered, you've given me more idea. And yes, of course, I would imagine people working in the care sector and health are at high risk of catching COVID and dying of it. So, yeah, very interesting. Thanks ever so much, Lee.
Thank you. Victoria, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Lee, for a really thorough report. And there's no waffle in there. It's all good information and some really good diagrams. Just picking up on what you just said, actually, about the contracted out services. So presumably these figures wouldn't include any issues that had come up with contractors. Is this just all in house? Is it?
Yes. Yeah. This
right,
is
right.
Purely our employees. It doesn't include contractors.
Sure.
It would include things like contractors injuring members of the public, but we haven't had any of those cases. So it would include that if we had any, but we don't have any. Just to be clear.
Yeah, that's reassuring. So actually that kind of came up during what you were saying, but I just wanted to, with all the reports we've received in the last few months, they all come with the caveat that it has been an unprecedented times and everything's been different in the last couple of years. No services operated normally, and as you're saying, the fact that people haven't been in the office as much, in the buildings as much, has clearly led to what looks like a decrease in figures. I suppose it is reassuring that it's low. It's reassuring that we seem to have good people on the ball, and presumably you're confident that everything's in place for it to remain low. We're not just lucky.
Yes, yeah. Our systems, I must say that when we benchmark against all the other councils across West Yorkshire, so Kirklees, Bradford, Wakefield, even all the way out to Scarborough and places like that in North Yorkshire, we are always in the top three. Most of the time we're at the top. And people do come to us for advice on systems and procedures that we've got in place, because we, touch wood, I don't want to jinx it, but they are very good procedures and they do keep us out of trouble 99% of the time. So yeah,
well, if your procedures are good, you don't need to touch wood, do you? It's your processes and procedures and everything's in place that needs to be. No, thank you. It's reassuring.
Thank you for that. I've only got a little bit of a question in terms of the working from home side. Did I miss anything there in terms of how we help and advise people in the more broad brush situation when they're working from home? Because obviously we lose control, for want of a better word, about the environment in which they're working. So it's more of an advisory thing in relation to people working from home. But I guess as employers, we still have responsibility for their health and safety. Is there anything that you'd want to tell us about what we do there or doing more of because of the situation?
Yeah, so one of the things that came after the Cabinet report was the new Agile Working Guidance, which has gone out to managers and staff now. And that covers everything from setting up your computers at home and preventing musculoskeletal ill health, to electrical safety in the home, to lone working in the community, driving at work. All those risks around agile working and remote working are being covered. We think we've got that pretty well managed. The biggest risk in terms of health has certainly been the workstation arrangements at home. And I know the Safe Workplaces group has done a fantastic job of getting desks and chairs and monitors and things out to people's homes using the council's transport service. So we've got there, and we did that within the last 12 months. So I think those risks are very well managed at the moment. I appreciate the mental health and the wellbeing side, which was discussed at the start of the meeting, and obviously public health are leading on the wellbeing of staff. And we've continued as well throughout the pandemic, doing a lot of wellbeing training for staff over Zoom and Teams where we can. Things like we do sleep management sessions now, we do stress management, we do things around mental health and wellbeing taster sessions. So we do all that sort of stuff, and we try to keep in contact with staff as much as we possibly can, because we appreciate they are on their own. Some of them do live on their own. Some of that, when you're working at home all day, I mean, I don't live on my own, but I've been working at home on my own all day, and it hasn't been particularly pleasant. So I can appreciate why people don't particularly like it. So it's helpful when we're advising people on it, because we have a bit of a invested interest in it as well. So yeah, that's it really on that.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. That's good to hear. Any other questions or comments from board members, or anything that Jackie or Lee want to throw into the mix? Sorry, Jacob. Yes, please.
Hi, thanks, Councillor Evans. Good evening, Lee. I just wanted to follow up on a question. You said that the council had to report themselves to the Health and Safety Executive for COVID breaches. Did I hear that correctly?
It's not for COVID breaches. It's under the Reporting of Injuries, Diseases and Dangerous Occurrences regulations of the RIDO. The HSE categorised COVID as a biological agent at the start of the pandemic, which meant that where you had reasonable evidence, now that is a very vague idea. It's a very vague term. You have to have reasonable evidence to suggest that that employee has contracted COVID at work. And in 17 of those cases, we believe we had that reasonable evidence. So that's why those reports were submitted. Does that make sense? I think if we had information to suggest they'd contracted it outside of work, so they've been in contact with a friend or a family member that had tested positive, we didn't report. But if we knew they'd been in contact with a client or another employee within a certain distance for a certain period of time, we said, on the balance, that is reasonable evidence to suggest they contracted it at work. So it's a bit of a subjective judgment call, but we've always gone through public health as well to determine what we think is work related. So does that sort of clarify that?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I just wondered, was that an obligation that was on just on local authorities then to report?
No, that's on every employer across the UK.
It was on all employers, was it? Right.
It was. Yeah.
Interesting point. Very just interesting how the government asked everyone to virtually report themselves to the Health and Safety Executive. So it's kind of putting a strict onus on them, wasn't it, to make sure they have the right processes in place. So I suppose it is good the council only had 17 actually. Then that is.
Yeah, the HSE came and investigated quite a lot of those cases that were reported in certain areas, some in libraries and some in transport, just off the top of my head. And they didn't pick up anything in terms of our arrangements. The problem was the virus was so virulent going through the community that even the best control measures in the world wouldn't guarantee 100% defence from it. But they commended our arrangements, really. So that's really positive.
Yeah, that's good to hear, isn't it? That, you know, in a perverse way, it's good to hear that we reported ourselves because we're taking it seriously, and that we got a reasonable, if you pardon the expression, bill of health as far as our processes would run. So that's good. That's positive. Any other questions from other members? I can't see any. I've not missed anybody. Please shout or forever hold thy peace. No. Good, thank you. So yes, just confirming, excellent report, Lee, and presentation, and great response in terms of the questions and so on. Very clear. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the final item on the agenda, which is item 7, the work programme. Lauren, do you want to just talk us through that one, highlight any points?
I think just to say, Chair, there's a few things that members have picked up this year that we've asked for in the new municipal year. So we'll make sure that's up to date, and that will go to the first board meeting in June for the new board's approval.
Good.
Okay.
Excellent. Any comments, thoughts from anybody, from any board members in terms of with the work programme? I think they've kept us fairly well at work through the year. So I think the only thing to do is to in the first instance, recognise that she's already been said that both Susan and Bob, Councillor Press and Councillor Metcalfe, it's their last meeting here. Bob, you've got your hand up though. So is that an old one, or is it? Do you want to make?
No. You're obviously going to come on to this. I was just going to mention. Obviously, Susan, as and I have mentioned, it is our last meeting, and what I wanted to say was. Thanks to the board for an interesting year, for coming from cabinet back to scrutiny again. It was little adjustments to make, but it's been a really interesting year. And particularly thank for all the support staff. Particularly thank you, Lauren, for you helping me as a deputy chair to get back into things and on scrutiny, and really being really keeping me informed and up to date with things. I really appreciate the work you've done over the year for the scrutiny board, and certainly thank Mike Lodge for again his input and the work behind the scenes that he does for through the year on scrutiny board issues, particularly for us on S&P. We're only remiss in work with Mike at the beginning of the meeting that. Go back quite a while with Mike and different things, both scrutiny and things like the People's Commission that we worked on so many years ago now. So there's been some quite interesting things happening over the years, and particularly in scrutiny and that kind of other special occasion work that we did for the council. So just thank you for your support, and be a bit strange not tuning in again after the 5th of May.
There is YouTube.
Could I just add, Bob, despite my contribution earlier, and I am sad that we never got to sort out the in-person stuff, I have enjoyed being on the scrutiny panel, and actually I think it's been really good natured, and I particularly enjoyed the work we did on debt. I thought that was really constructive, so thanks for that, and I'm sure our successors will do an equally sterling job. Yes, so thank you.
And I'd also just like to finish and thank you, Ashley, for chairing the meeting, for being the chair over the last year. You've certainly kept me as deputy, kept me fully informed and up to date with what's happening, and how little sometimes when I get to the
value of the contribution, Bob.
Pre get together meeting before this main scrutiny. Yeah, so appreciate the work you've done for the board over the year.
Very kind, and appreciate your support, and Susan as well. Thank you very much. And sorry for the odd Sue slipping in there as well, Susan, but my apologies for that. But Mike, you wanted to come on board, I think, on this one.
I just wanted to say thank you to Councillor Press and to Councillor Metcalfe. Both have made a great contribution. Councillor Metcalfe, in particular, we were reminiscing, and I've worked with Bob, if I may say, Bob now we're near the ending of the meeting, since 2009, and Bob's made a great contribution to Scrutiny in all the time I've been involved. So thank you very much, and thank you very much, Councillor Press, as well.
Good stuff. So thanks, duly noted, and thank you. We're going to miss both of you from this group. So thank you very much, one and all, for those who have been here this time, and hopefully we might see you in the new year, as it were, in some form or another. I think we've worked very well together as a group, and hopefully we can continue to do so and make good contributions. And thank you too to all the officers of their contributions, and not rabbiting on too long and reading their whole reports out to us, but giving us the highlights and the opportunity for us to ask silly questions, good questions, insightful questions, and so on. So thank you, one and all.